Hello again, this is Gavin Boyter, and this is my channel for storytelling. Today is the 10th story in a row. They're all 1,000 words long, and as you probably already know, they're all based on 5 random words selected from an online text generator. And the words for today are... So this one is very different. This is the first science fiction story I've written for a long time, and I've kind of gone to town. It might be quite hard to read because there are some very unusual personal pronouns in there, but I'll try my best. Anyway, it's called Import-Export. Once again, Macaulay and Sykes were out on a dank and foggy night, hauling cargo onto a hover truck headed for the nearest starbase, using old-fashioned manpower instead of big data-linked robot lifts, which would report their activities back to a logistics supernode somewhere in China. They had bribed the usual security guards to let them have half an hour to replace some of the climate-controlled pods with their own near-identical ones. Import-export wasn't all it used to be. What had once been an adventurous racket for devil-may-care types was now a strange and unpredictable blend of high-tech and old-school. They swapped custom-built isopods with their low-tech cryogenics. Trillionaires in the former pods, whose off-world visas were pre-approved, were exchanged for pre-frozen ordinary middle-class folk in the latter. Their clients had greased the right hands and spoken to the right shady go-betweens, and this is where Macaulay and Sykes came in, to buy a legal passage for just the sum total of their earthly worth. Customers' assets were liquidated and poured through a network of cyber currency exchanges until they were scrubbed clean. Some of the flow, a few thousand quarks, trickled down to the lowly fixers who actually ran the show. It wasn't enough for the risks they were taking. If they were caught, Macaulay and Sykes would undergo personality erasure, their synaptic structures harvested and put to use in the World Wide Web, a hive construct of meshed human minds. Capital punishment had been outlawed 400 years previously, when some bits of the world were still inhabitable for more than a couple of months a year. If anything, personality erasure was worse. You lived on, in theory, as part of the very system you'd spent your adult life battling against. Macaulay, a birth male currently spending time as a woman, and Sykes, a herma female, slammed shut the warehouse door and palmed value into the outstretched hands of the 2 security guards, both normative birth females. Most security personnel were, due to their superior peripheral vision. Macaulay jumped up into the cab and programmed the pilot for Starbase ED-19, deep in the heart of the Pentland Hills south of Edinburgh. Sykes phased out and began to recharge Heres batteries from the truck's own fusion reserve. A new alternative to sleep, Macaulay was still creeped out by how a chargee could answer simple questions and even look at you with eyes open, whilst deep in this uncanny slumber substitute. Sykes, a woman-an of few words, did neither. Half an hour later, they cleared security at ED-19 and proceeded to chaperone their charges, namely 98 legitimate evacuees and 2 smuggled ones, into the string ship Hawking 09. Tomorrow it would shimmer off for the Pleiades wormhole, and their transactions would be ratified. Quarks would flow into their accounts. Just one more of these runs, and Macaulay would have saved enough to have himself illicitly transferred off-world to join his wife and kids. The Earth's 2 million inhabitants lived a nomadic existence, following a habitable band around the planet's circumference, living and working this month in Scotland, next month in Norway, then Russia for 6 months, then off to Canada for 3, and finally a deliciously cool spell in Greenland before stopping off in Scotland again. The average daytime temperature was a shade under 45 degrees. Beyond the band it soared towards boiling point, and the seas were permanently swirling with hot mist. Once they'd clocked off, another one of those perplexing pre-catastrophic turns of phrase, Macaulay turned to Sykes and suggested, "Drink? There's a place in Old Reekie still has a few bottles of 2035 Macallan." So he knew it was futile. As well as being a woman and of few words, Sykes was also an aesthete. So he neither ate organic foodstuffs nor drank anything but filtered water. Gel and water. What a mad way to live. I'll pass, murmured Sykes. See you next time. Neither of them knew when that would be. They'd simply receive a skin message telling them a client wanted to talk. They'd go and do the deal in one of the blind spot alleys in the Old Town, the bit built in the 1700s, not the old town, which predated it. So he liked working with Sykes. She was fun in Harris' peculiar way, possessing a very dry sense of humour without babbling endlessly, the way the malfunctioning cyborg who'd preceded Harrim had. Nevertheless, without enough quirks for an entanglement chat with Harris' wife and kids, Sykes was at something of a loose end. Sahi had an idea. There was still a drop or two in Sahi's hip flask, the oldest and most valuable thing Sahi owned, although its contents ran close at 40 quarks of fluid ounce, enough to get Sahim up the crags to get a look into Arthur's Seat. The former tourist draw had been walled off recently due to the occasional rumble and gout of magma, but as ever, Macaulay knew a security guard to bribe. Fortunately, Styx Murphy was working Queen's Park security detail tonight, and gladly let Macaulay through in exchange for a wee dram and a captive audience for his latest assault on the drum kit she kept at the back of the booth. Macaulay began to climb, with Sahi's ears still ringing, forcing Sahi's way through a hot and filthy rain that had sprung up from nowhere, clicking Sahi's vision aid onto heat mode for the full light show as Sahi ascended the curving path leading up the side of the slanted slab of rock that constituted the crags. From its top, Sahi would be able to look down into the smoking cone that was Arthur's Seat. Sahid looked down at all that violent, raw, red power, an ancient force that revealed how inhospitable the planet Earth could really become, and Sahid dream of all that off-world greenery, and fantasize about smelling the roses, and diving into the cool crystal lakes, and making love to Alison as a woman, and cradling Angus and Maddie in Sahid's arms. So he'd look into the fire and dream of ice. So he'd never seen it. Oh, that was tough to read. The pronouns are much easier to read in writing than they are to speak, but that's all part of the joy of discovery. Anyway, I hope you liked that. If you did, and I think it's one I may expand one day, please subscribe. Please have a look at another story or two, and yeah, we'll try and grow this thing. I have plans to perhaps have some guest readers and writers featuring, but first of all we have to grow the audience, I think, before I can do anything like that. So please help me and we'll spread the word. Thanks for listening. Not to be... What? It's all going a bit wrong there. Try again. The bit built in the 1700s, not the even more ancient bit. Ah! That's gone wrong. Bugger. Dry sense of humour without babbling endlessly the way the malfunctioning cyborg could no, it's too difficult.